book is called Controlling Contested Places, Late Antique Antioch and the Spatial Politics of Religious Controversy. It really was looking at how to use space and how people think about particular places in order to rethink the field of late antiquity. I feel like there's a lot to be gained from adding geographical and topographical conversations into the larger picture. When I was thinking about a project where I could look at a single place rather than tracing the life of a person or the interpretation of a particular text or a controversy, I was finishing my first project, and I was thinking, what if I just sat in one location and watched as powerful figures came through that place, as questions of orthodoxy were negotiated in that place? How does the place itself help shape what's happening to those controversies, to those people? And so I was thinking where would be a good place to settle, and there were lots of possible options. But with Antioch, first, it's such a huge metropolis in the 4th century, which is what I was working on. It has an imperial palace. It hosts Olympic Games periodically, which was exciting. But most importantly, it hosts Libanius and John Chrysostom, and these are two authors who have a huge amount of writings who survive until today. And the advantage then is that you have a Christian preacher who's giving one perspective of his version of Christianity, but you have also in the same time and same city, you have the writings of somebody who's not a Christian, a pagan, as we used to call them. And so you can actually put them into conversation with each other. And then you have on top of it, the Emperor Julian makes an appearance in the city of Antioch in the 360s, so in proximity to these other extant texts. Ended up reading a lot of cultural geographers' work, and that made me think of place in a way I had never thought of it before, because they talk about places as intentionally constructed, or even not intentionally, but as being constructed to have particular ways in which people perceive them, meaning that they have for people in that city. So that got me really interested in what I've called spatial politics, but anyway, the politics of how places are shaped. And that can be rhetorically, it can be physically, sometimes it's the destruction of a place physically, sometimes it's somebody saying that place you thought was wonderful to go to is actually full of demons and dangerous and you should stay away from it. John Chrysostom speaking about the synagogue in his city of Antioch. So I think what I found was not just how a theological controversy was shaped by the people living in one city, but much more about how the places in which events take place or happen is in fact a participant in those controversies, right? So it's not just a backdrop against which these conversations happen, that it's actually it shapes the conversation. I think I was trying to show that people see the city landscape and the rural countryside around it differently because of the way powerful figures like the emperor or the preacher or the teacher in town are telling them that what those places represent or should represent, whether they're good to see, what they should think of when they go to those places, right? Like there's a temple that's partly destroyed in a terrible fire in the early 360s, and it also then becomes a shrine of a Christian martyr. And so John Chrysostom, the Christian preacher, is arguing very strongly that when you see this place, you should remember it was a temple so that you can remember it has been destroyed and that the Christian martyr was stronger than the Greek god Apollo, whose temple it was. I think the implications of what's being called the spatial turn in the field of late antiquity are pretty significant. I think we've spent a lot of time disembodied, looking at texts as disembodied and therefore decontextualized. And I think if even when you just read a text, you're picturing where on the map are these things taking place, it opens up all sorts of new conversations that we haven't spent a lot of time thinking about. Because if you are looking at people writing to each other, and they're living, 10 miles apart, or they're living, across the empire from each other. It's a different sort of conversation, and the context matters for the conversations that we're looking at. So I hope that some of the ways in which I've found geographers' work useful to bring into late antiquity and it's made me ask new questions. And I think that my hope is that it will prompt other people to ask other new questions that also take place very seriously as a factor in the politics of what's happening in late antiquity more generally.